language for the to document these proceedings, and then you guys are done. Okay. All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Want this colored one?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Well, I collect all your papers.
All right. We are ready for the continued public hearing on site plan approval for the application for 22 Sears Road. We've given this 15 minutes for review, but I think it's going to take longer than that. If we could try to hold the presentation to say 15 minutes, and then give the planning board 15 minutes for questions and comments, and then we'll open the floor to discussion and questions from the audience for 15 minutes. So we'll try to do this in 45 if possible. Did you want to say anything before we, well, did anyone want to say anything while they're setting up? All right.
I can tell you where we're at. We're at my name is Mark McGrath, my office is in Concord, and I represent the applicant. The applicant has taken to heart a lot of the comments that were made in the last session of the public hearing, and you'll see in the plans that we're about to unfold for you a lot of revisions that you yourself suggested. So this is one of those situations where we think those comments are making a better plan, and I think you'll see that momentarily. Sterling and Peter doing his thing out. Peter, you good? So one at a time, Peter Gaming will talk about civil changes that they made. Alan Mayor will talk about architectural changes, and Kathy will talk about landscape.
I've got a bigger run this time. Yes, we do. That was good. Sorry, guys. Yep.
Changes since the last time we met. One, we took the house and we made some modifications to that, and Alan will go through those, shrinking the house. We did take and we moved it so that the entire house and everything is within the building envelope, so that's no longer an issue. We slid it further to the west. We also did make some modifications to the driveway, and Kathy will deal with that. We got rid of the circular driveway portion. She's going to go into a little more detail on that. We did soils testing, which was probably the biggest issue as far as I'm concerned. Got out there, we did 5 different deep test holes. Groundwater elevations, observed groundwater elevation around 158. Seasonal high groundwater elevation around 160. A little bit higher than we originally anticipated. Soils, very good soils out there for infiltration, coarse, sandy, gravelly material. Probably the biggest thing, noting that the seasonal high is higher at 160. We had to change the chambers that we're using. We had a 30-inch SC730 Storm Tech chamber. Had to go with an 18 in order to keep our 2-foot separation between the seasonal high and the bottom of our stone. As a result of that, these systems got wider, more chambers, but shallower. The other things we did was we had comments from Dave Conway, we had comments from other consultants, Metro West, Rob Gemma, looked at those comments, CM values, coefficients, and then went back and forth and sort of tweaked the model and came up with the seasonal high also affected the soil absorption system. We have to raise that up a little bit as well. As a result of that, the driveway got raised up a little bit in this area as well. So there's some revised grading in through here and across the back here. But those are, overall, I think we're pretty much in good shape as far as storm drainage goes with the Conway and Metro West. It handles all of the runoff for the 100-year storm event, which is more than what the town requires us to do.
It's a reduction of runoff?
Reduction in runoff, I don't have the exact numbers, but we did have my
Dave, do you know offhand?
Not offhand, I mean, it's for the 2-year storm, it's like a 15%, is that something? For the two?
Yeah, it's about that, yeah. Sports court's been eliminated, and any other issues? Those are the primary ones. I think the season high groundwater is probably the biggest or most significant design change.
You never get into that with your foundation.
Excuse me?
How does that affect the foundation since the seasonal groundwater is higher than expected?
Well, we had it. We thought we were around 159 before, and our basement slab elevation was 162. So the fact that it's 160, we're still 2 feet above, and that's about as close as I want to come. So we didn't have to adjust the house elevation as a result of the seasonal stormwater.
So nothing changed with the original, right?
Correct.
Original, right?
Correct.
It's just exactly what we're going for. That
Elevation is correct. So I'll let Kathy talk about the landscape.
The hardscape changes that we were requested to look at and modify, we did. We now have a parking court with 4 spaces. There's a granite walkway running right through the middle of those, so we removed the circular drive, which also took out all the lights that were in the circle. We still have landscape lights, little guys like 18 inches high, on the front walk. And we did add a few more of the little tiny eyebrow lights in the seawall. So those are the only hardscape changes that we made. We increased the buffer on all 3 sides by doubling and sometimes tripling up trees. Actually, before I tell you that, I walked the site again and marked 58 trees to remain on the property. We had very few before. So they're scattered about. You kind of have to look up close. But these all in the meadow will stay. There are a lot of them, not a lot, you sort of look at them, but here, here, here. There are a bunch of maples in here, maple here, we saved some maples in here. There wasn't a lot of evergreen material in here we're saving except the big, huge pines, which we were going to save anyway. And then nothing really along here, but a group of maples here, some in the lawn, and another one back here. So we had a total of 58 trees that we hope to save. So working with those, I
Those
adjusted.
58 trees that were definitely going to be down last time.
We had some, we were still saving some before, but we have way more. I wasn't actually preserving any in this zone along here before.
They were all fine.
Right, and we're also actually moving this planting to now to encompass the bridle trail, which before I was respecting because I didn't think we could be in there, but now apparently we can. So we're able to push this back closer to the neighbors. And we have increased the tree sizes so that we have quite a number of 14 to 16 foot high trees in this buffer all the way around. Many of them are in here where neighbors are much closer, not only to the house, but to all the activity. Driveways more lights on this side of the house. We haven't changed the meadow at all. That's about what we did.
There was some question as to the health of trees on the southern side. Did you?
There's a question of the health of the trees all over the site.
Yeah, but specifically on that southern side.
On this side?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing Well, we don't have any trees on the backside of the wall. And in here, the only ones I could really find are the ones that I've marked. It's just a very scrubby, and especially when you're going to start to see them in the middle of a lawn. It's one thing when we're preserving them along the edges and we can kind of snuggle trees up around them, but when they're standing in the middle of the lawn, you want them to have some presence. And a lot of the trees there have very little presence. Most of the canopy on the evergreens is way up high. A lot of them have. So I found the best ones I could find. We may find more, but it's very hard when you're out there because you can hardly see one from another. So but I found 58. So I thought that was good, right?
It is good.
Yeah, that's good.
The stone wall, did you change the alignment of the stone wall of the south?
Mm-mm. So it's still running right where it was before.
Where it had been moved to, right?
Exactly. That hasn't changed since the beginning. Right.
When you say that you're able to encroach a little bit on the bridle path,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And is it still passable? Is it passable now? I'm not.
It doesn't appear that it's used at all. And I think, but I don't know who should speak to that. Do you want to speak to the bridle path? It was that 10-foot strip that ran along here.
It's a
It's just overgrown.
It's a dead trail. There's no way into it or off of it. It's just something that's there in the language. But it's been written out in the other parcels up at the entrance on Conan and the entrance on Laurel. So there's no way to access
So
it.
I'm just wondering if Forest and Trail should be coming back to say, hey, by the way, we've got easement there, at some point in the future.
That was done back when that whole area was open and there were no trees, and it was used as a horse. They had a horse around that. That was the purpose for it. It hasn't been used, obviously, like that in 50 years. Horse and Trail doesn't use it.
My attorney did the acquisition of the title right now. Rick, can you just quickly
Yeah,
talk about this for me?
This trail appears on a plan and nothing else, no verbiage along with it. As indicated, hasn't been used in at least 50 years. If someone were to assert a claim, the worst that would happen is they'd have to move out. They'd have to move back that landscape, but it isn't going to happen. It hasn't happened in 50 years. And there's no way in.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. And I just was going to say on this big rendered plan, there's some color variation that may make it a little bit easier. But this color, obviously. Oh, I thought I told you.
No.
Sorry.
I was trying to help.
This color represents existing trees to remain. So they're here, and you can see them popping through here. The dark green is evergreens, and the brighter green is new deciduous trees. So it's subtle, but you can at least start to see where they are in there.
Did you happen to say what the total exterior lighting level is at this point?
Just a second.
We put a figure in both lumens and watts.
13,550 lumens, 1,260 watts. Right? The incandescent. Yeah.
And now,
All dark sky.
all dark sky fixed.
Just to refresh, that stone wall on the south side, that moved from where it
It's
now
currently,
is?
it's currently right. It's currently right here.
And, oh, you moved it out,
They moved it back to the property line.
okay. Yep.
Okay, in terms of the architecture of the building, what we heard was desire to see if we could put the house on a diet and also to see what we could do about ameliorating the scale of the house and the roof line of the house. And one of the, I think, the most significant architectural changes was suggested by the board, which was to have the gambrel profile in the center section of the house. And by incorporating that and turning those into dormers, I think it breaks down the scale of the center part and brings the roof down. And we also, in response to, one of the suggestions was to, for the third garage, was to put a hip roof on that again, so that you weren't seeing a gable end, off of that. I think also, hopefully, the three-dimensional rendering gives you a better sense of how the scale of the house is broken down. And then, in addition to that, we put the house itself on a diet, and we were able to reduce the footprint by 302 square feet. We're able to reduce the RGFA by 560 square feet, and we were able to reduce the length of the building by 6 feet in this direction. The ridge height stayed the same. We had tried, we were considering lowering the basement about a foot, but then when the water level came in, we put it back where it was. And there was a very slight adjustment to the mean average grade based on further surveying, which raised the mean average grade by 0.2 feet, which meant that we were technically 0.2 feet lower without having changed any of that. On the, in terms of the lighting, for the architectural part of it, we deleted 3 of the exterior lights, and then we changed the remaining 13. They had been an equivalent of the 100-watt equivalent, and so we lowered them all to a 60-watt equivalent of the LED. That reduced the incandescent equivalent by about 820 watts on the building. And then the changes that Kathy made reduced the landscape lighting by approximately 120 equivalent watts, incandescent equivalent watts for the landscape. And the lumens overall were approximately at 16,000 before, and now they're 13,550. There is it.
There's no fireplace.
There's just gas fireplace, so it's just kind of goes out the back.
Power back type thing.
Right. It would look good with it.
You want more tall.
Right, I know we're talking.
Yeah, the Santa Claus.
All right, is that it for your presentation?
Just a couple of things in exiting. One is that keep in mind that this is not just the buildable portion of the lot, but also it's the unbuildable portion across the Hamilton layout. This is not a 2.5 acre parcel. It's really more in the neighborhood of 5.5, and that will remain in its present condition. And the other thing is that I saw some suggestion in correspondence to the board that this was not a lot that was ever supposed to be built upon, but Mr. Nelson actually planned that this would be his home. And so this was always in the cards. It's not something that just popped out of the woodwork. And you'll recall I represented the Nelson estate prior to the transaction that Carolyn had transferred the property over to the current owner.
Dave, any comments?
As Peter said, we've gone back and forth with the drainage over the last couple of weeks between him, myself, Rob. We're okay with it. Just make it clear, this project is going to reduce the rate and volume off this site. Now I know there's other neighborhood issues, and we had a meeting with the DPW, and they came in about some off-site stuff. But this project won't exacerbate those; it should slightly improve those downstream issues. Which, are, unfortunately fall to the DPW and not an easy mess to untangle. Basically, it's not just the maintenance of the culvert, but after that, this stream runs through some private property, which they have no access to, or they'd have to get an easement from. And, that type of thing, so.
Want to address that?
Sure.
We have rights on the adjacent properties to the, I guess that would be to the northeast there, to come out and do some work on those properties before we get to Sears Road. So we will do some maintenance cleanup work in there in order to facilitate improvements. We're more than happy to work with the DPW to work under Sears Road to do whatever needs to be done there as well. We just have to work out the details of getting some sort of informed consent.
The DPW has actually written us a letter signed on Weston letterhead saying that we have consent from them as long as Concom signs off on it. We've spoken to Michelle about cleaning the culvert. So we have made a lot of headway in that area.
Do we have that documented?
No, I don't have that.
We got to get that documentation.
Yeah, if you can send that to me.
Well, this is a good point to bring up. Joe Langdon received an email from a civil engineer that's been looking at it from some of our perspective and pointing out some issues relative to the groundwater.
Okay.
And pointed out, well, this is what he basically said. He said in an email, Joe Langdon has a copy, but I'll just read this synopsis thing. In reviewing the information, it appears that the recent floodplain study by Columbia Design Group was conducted under a clear pipe program. In other words, that culvert was conducted for the first time ever after 4 previous studies with a clear pipe. In other words, so the water flowing through. Previous studies conducted in the area had also evaluated the culvert under a fully blocked condition to provide a conservative analysis of the witnessed local flooding that's been taking place. So in other words, 4 previous studies all included a block pipe, which has been the constant condition of it. This study has it completely full when it opened. In other words, so it's perfect drainage, but it hasn't been that way. So that's an issue. Joe Langdon received a copy of this information.
Who's
today.
the engineer that you're referring to?
This was from Gregory St. Louis at Beals Associates, well-regarded firm in Boston.
So if the board would like, I can read the rest of that email. We got it at 3:39 today.
Because he received information from the town a few minutes before that. That's why he got it at 3:32.
The email continues, we request that the HydroCAD analysis be revised to depict a fully blocked culvert condition. This information would provide the potential homeowner, butters, and town with the information necessary to fully review this development in comparison to the watershed. Should the project move forward and receive approval, we request that the site be conditioned to continue to provide quarterly maintenance of the culvert to assure a free flow condition, which will provide a measure that the development is not further aggravated by local flooding condition within this neighborhood. Unfortunately, our office is unable to attend tonight's meeting. Thank you for your time and consideration throughout this process.
Okay, a couple of things. The first thing is the suggestion that we might condition something that actually isn't on the site, which is something that we're prescribed from doing. We can't condition off-site. So conditioning that the culvert be maintained in a clear condition is something that would be a good idea, and we can make that suggestion, but it's not something that we can force someone to do on their own.
By someone, you're talking about the town of Weston?
No, I'm talking about the property owner.
Property
That's what
owner?
the suggestion is. This property owner is going to keep the culvert clear.
Which isn't on his property.
Which
So
isn't on
it's
his
a
property.
culvert under Sears Road, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So
Public way.
that's a culvert that's
Town.
owned and should be maintained by the town.
Town,
Right.
right.
So the town's not doing it.
Exactly.
Well,
it
they
hasn't
haven't
done it
done
in
it.
3 different studies.
Well,
They haven't done it.
That's a different problem in terms of ensuring that the town does it.
Completely agree. The issue he's bringing up, though, is in coming up with the numbers, they did not look at the fact that this water was there. In other words, they didn't cover the issue that it's being blocked. In other words, it was free flow down. So that issue has to be addressed because it runs off into all of this other area.
Right, and that was number 2 on the list, and that's a question for Dave, our consulting civil engineer. What's your response to that?
So, a couple of things. The issue of the culvert will go on whether this house happens or does not happen. So the drainage improvements with this house, so if, that's going to be a forever thing with this happening or not happening. And I agree it should be maintained. However that can be done, I would love to see it. Second, although Peter's on vacation, on the study, we asked you to look at the culvert half blocked.
Yeah, we looked at all three conditions.
Yeah.
They're not in the report, because the only condition is fully open.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, that's not quite an accurate statement, and what you just said, we looked at it all, sort of implies that it's in the report.
I didn't say that it was in the final report. The
It sounds like-
determination was that we eventually came to the conclusion that that the culvert needed to be cleaned and maintained, and under that condition, that's what the analysis showed for the 100-year flood. The prior studies also looked at all three conditions as well,
Right.
flowing free, flowing partially blocked, and flowing completely blocked, all three.
And they came to different numbers than this
Actually, their
report
numbers
did.
were very, very close to what I had.
Different datums.
Different datums. yeah.
Right, but you could take the HydroCAD program and run the exact same thing. In other words, do a comparison. In other words, do fully blocked, do partially blocked.
Yeah.
And that hasn't been done.
Yeah, no, but
You did.
But the real question is, does this proposal make that condition worse?
No. Here's the thing. The whole impact of it was kind of dismissed as, hey, this is all set. When previous studies have showed the high groundwater, they've showed basically that the culvert, because a number of the studies showing that the culvert has never been cleaned out. So what you've got is a situation that exists now. We keep on asking the town as neighbors to look at, saying we're in a real precarious situation and this can make it worse. Our suggestion is, how about something like cleaning out the culvert, whether it's a town or whether it's the other people doing it, to make this a reasonable result for all parties involved.
No objection to that
But
whatsoever.
it never happens.
But again, we're hamstrung to a certain extent because we can't require the town's DPW to do anything on town land. This is a public right of way. We can suggest it. We can suggest it in the strongest possible language, but we can't say, DPW, thou shalt keep the culvert open. We can't. We don't have that authority.
The point is, though,
the Board of Selectmen would have that authority.
Right, but the point is a more basic and simple one. The current report showed numbers based on a situation that was not including other factors in past studies. He's suggesting, the civil engineer is suggesting those other two scenarios, blocked and partially blocked, be run as well, so that you get a clearer picture of the impact of this project on the land around it.
Well, their engineer said that he did that, those evaluations. He just didn't include them in his report.
But they're two different datum, as he points out quite correctly.
Well,
That doesn't matter. I mean,
It's
as
a
long as
different
It does
data,
matter.
you just convert from one datum to another. It's not
Yeah,
like
he gets
Right, but that hasn't been done.
I think you're going back to the more important issues, whether or not we build this new house or not, the culvert and all the runoff, all the characteristics are going to be the same. We're putting the new house there. We've got a storm drainage system that actually reduces the flow from that parcel of land down to that culvert. Without putting the house in, without putting all the storm drainage and infiltration systems that we have, you will have, right now, more flow going to that culvert. It's scary. That's
This
the bottom
civil
line.
engineer isn't bringing up any of those issues. He's bringing up the simple issue of the testing was done and gave a deceptive figure. All other conservative studies did not point to the same number. Run the datum again, and then let's see what that number is. That's what he's basically suggesting.
It's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant.
Again, it sounds to me as though we're arguing over the baseline against which both the studies were done. They were done against two different baselines, but the net result, what I'm understanding is the net result was the numbers might be different, the actual numbers, but the results were the same.
And you know, let's be fair to his engineer. He got that this afternoon. I'm going off the recall because I've been looking at this thing for 15 years, and I'm very tired of hearing about the Sears Road culvert not being maintained. So I'm as frustrated as the neighbors that the town's never kind of figured out how to keep that clean. But I've been reviewing this for 15 years, all those studies, and you know, I know when Peter first came up to me about how to look at it, I said, you need to look at it at the minimum that it's half full. So the data that you got tonight, I saw came from, you know, because my stuff's archived, Peter's actually on vacation. I think, it came from Rob Moore. It might not be the complete thing, but off my memory and off Peter, you can agree or disagree, but you did it, is you analyzed it, and I looked at it with the culvert half block.
We looked at it all three.
So full,
Right.
half full, and then completely
And
blocked.
this civil engineer is saying it's only looked at full, in other words, fully open with the datum supply.
And I'm saying he doesn't have all the information and that it was.
Okay, because it wasn't provided to him.
Right, because,
That means the email you sent to him today didn't have the information he needed to make.
but that's also, let's be clear, another issue.
Okay.
All right?
Take it down.
The building inspector made a determination, about where this district is on this site. And he did that 2 years ago. And now we're talking about the house on the site.
I think we're sort of going around in circles. What I would suggest is just, if you have any results for the half blocked and fully blocked assessments, you might ship them over to Joe, and then that we could close that loop.
Can I suggest one other thing too?
Yeah.
I think it's important to look at what we're proposing here.
No,
in terms of solving the actual problem, if we get rejected on this house, there's no way that culvert's going to get cleaned out unless DPW comes up with, deciding to do. My point.
I don't see this. I don't see what's being said is a challenge to the feasibility of the house. It's something to do
Separate issue completely.
with dealing with the culvert on
Yeah.
Sears Road. That's what I'm hearing.
That may solve the problem, as we just mentioned, but I did find a copy of that. Not a pretty one, but it is a copy.
June 6th of 2013.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know what it is yet.
It's your permission from the DPW to clean the culvert.
All right, this is a letter from Robert Hoffman to Fred Margolis of the Growth Companies. Dear Mr. Margolis, this will serve as permission from the Western Department of Public Works for you to arrange for and pay for cleaning of the drainage culvert under Sears Road near Concord Road, subject to the following conditions. And this is dated June 6, 2013. Work must be pre-approved by the Western Conservation Agent, Michelle Deng, including but not limited to the method of cleaning, environmental protection, timing, and any other requirements set forth by the Conservation Agent. 2, the DPW Engineering Division must be provided notice of the work at least 2 business days prior to the cleaning, so the representative can be present to witness the cleaning. 3, the materials removed from the culvert must be disposed of in accordance with all applicable regulations. 4, any damage to the culvert resulting from the cleaning process will be your responsibility. 5, a street occupancy permit must be obtained by the contractor used for the cleaning. Fees will be waived since this cleaning provides a benefit to the town of Weston.
That's for a one-time.
That's so he's authorized cleaning the culvert.
Exactly what I thought too. When I ran into Fred Margolis over in Chestnut Hill, and he was saying anything he could do in the area. The point is, though, that the suggestion of this civil engineer, since the way it fills up all the time, and it's never been able to really be cleared, is they just do a quarterly cleaning of it, and that will probably alleviate the problem for them and for us. So he had a solution too. He wasn't just throwing something out there. He's saying a quarterly cleaning will keep that culvert clear, cause the drainage problem to go away. Good for them, good for us. So
Well, it sounds like this moves over to Bob Hoffman of the DPW, and sort of, and that's where it should be.
As long as it moves with an action to be fulfilled as opposed to just moving.
I'll say this one more last time. We can't condition the DPW to do anything in a public right-of-way. We can make a suggestion. We can't condition it to somebody at DPW, namely the director of the DPW, is beginning to take action to address the culvert. Now, did you have any other comments, Dave?
Maybe a suggestion. They can't, I don't know, they can't just roll in there and clean it every quarter, but they could inspect it.
We can make that suggestion.
Well, I mean, the applicant.
I don't see how we could require the applicant to do that. It's not on their property. You know what I'm saying?
We're happy to help in this situation. We've gone to the DPW to try and get some traction on this to clean this. But there's only so much that does.
We're certainly working in good faith with DPW,
Yeah.
but we can't subject ourselves to 5 years down the road to limit the DPW. That's a forced purchase. So right now, you see the extraordinary measures that the applicant has gone through to take initial steps and clean it up for the first time in what? You tell me.
I don't know.
Ever?
Well, I think it's on the burden on the citizen that sees it not being cleaned out to rattle the cages of the town to get it cleaned out.
It's been done for years. The reports all
I would
listed.
say rattle more cages or higher cages or show up every day, whatever it is, pitchforks, I don't know. But, you know, we don't have the authority to do what you'd like us to do. So those are the people that need to be, you know,
We'll make a strong
need to hear that
suggestion.
squeaky wheel.
Because Fred Margolis, the same idea I had when I discussed things with him, he was very accommodating about anything he could do with his guys to take a look at it and see what he could do. What I'm pointing out is that's the reasonable solution without, rattling City Hall or anything, just get it done.
I think you got it though. I mean, honestly, I've been hearing about it for forever, and about 15 years ago, it caused some big issues.
It's caused issues since too, flooding in the neighborhood.
I mean, I don't know what kind of liability the town has for causing flooding by not maintaining their culverts.
All right. Moving on. Kim, do you have any comments on the landscape?
No, Kathy and I did a few different go-arounds on this, and I'm pleased with what she's come up with.
Do you feel that she's...
I'd be interested. I just walked the ground like 3 hours ago, and I would be interested to know what 58 additional marked trees, because there's only 7 trees still marked there with the green ribbon.
I didn't mark them on the site, but they're on the survey and located.
It's hard to get a sense of what it's going to look like if you can't actually.
And then kind of tromp around.
Yeah, I did. I trumped around for a couple hours. So the other thing, so as far as there's only 7 trees still marked of the several hundreds that are out there. And then secondly, the other comment about like looking for value of trees, they don't see value of trees as it borders our side, but they're not actually looking at it from our side. One of my concerns with their plan is it's much more intensive in what their view will be than what our view would be. And so we actually even had provided you guys pictures thinking we were going to meet it. There are several sort of stately maples that are already 30 to 40 feet tall that are just on the side of their side of the existing rock wall, which are slated to be sort of knocked down. And I know that's not of value to them, but every fall we get, beautiful foliage from those trees. Now, those trees probably aren't of value because they want to push the wall back, and those trees would impede that, sort of process. But there are trees there that are of value, and I just walked it today, and they're not listed, trust me.
You're the neighbor on the south.
We are indeed. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
I would be happy to walk and find if somebody finds a tree that I didn't find and it's got some value, happy to. But they're going to be in the middle of the lawn because there is nothing on the. There's. To go back, no, that plan, that's just to clarify. Is my plan? Where is it?
None of
The difference between that side and the north side is that all the trees that used to exist along this buffer don't exist anymore. So the only ones I could find that seemed valuable to me and seemed to have a reasonable canopy are the ones I marked. But I would be happy to go out there, and if there are some in this space, I know that my client would like to have some open lawn space for children to play. But certainly if there are some in there, we'll mark a few more.
Kathy, I thought you had some in that top left corner.
Yeah, there are some up here.
There are some up there as
some
well.
nice maples there.
And
a couple here. I didn't find anything. There is nothing behind the wall. So anything that we would save would be in this zone here. And so I tried to find some here and keep some here, but keep this open for the future homeowners. If there was some real specimen in there, I don't think we'd be averse
Can you
to saving it.
flag the trees you have in mind?
I mean, I
Take a
certainly
look?
could. I think that, you know, but I don't know at what point you want to sort of let us sort of speak our piece about the project, or whether we're just addressing the concerns.
This
that
is
you
it.
have. Okay, yeah, I mean, the thing is that what you're proposing, I mean, all of us bought into, every house that abuts this, bought into this with a column of 40 to 60 foot trees behind our property. That has been the nature and peaceful quality of the thing that drew us to this. And what they plan on doing is removing 40 to 60 foot trees, replacing them with 14 to 16 foot trees that'll grow about a foot a year, so won't provide the same degree of privacy and shelter for another 20 to 30 years when most of us won't even be around. And I think while that will affect all of us abutters, our property in particular, because our house built in the 1960s sits on a 7.5 foot knoll. So basically, we easily clear 30 plus feet. So we will be looking, and the back of their house is the one that's opened up, as most families are, to full glass and light. We will be looking into their windows, and they into ours, all year long, especially in the winter months, and nothing that they plan on putting there would even remotely replace what they plan on taking down.
Do we have any site sections?
Oh, Peter.
Sure, but I don't think we have
Okay.
unless there's.
See that? If you pull out one of those is labeled old, it should be thicker than that. Thicker than that. It should say old from 6.5, 5.5, and it should be in there.
In a second.
One of the things that's sort of tough to visualize, I think, when you're looking at this and when you're out there, is that if you look at the picture like this, which you have all seen of that view now, there's a lot of foliage, but when you start looking at the individual trees, it's a rough group of trees. So I tried to find the ones that seem to have merit and health and canopy. When you add all up all the sort of junky trees, it looks like a lot of canopy, but when you start to look at individual trees, you see that you start to lose that.
So you're not aware of these?
No, but if somebody found some that are there that I missed on a really buggy, yucky day, I'm happy to try. And if we need to go and mark them with,
You had said that you didn't, the additional 58 trees you did not flag,
I didn't
so
flag
those
them,
aren't
but
taped out in the.
No, they're on the survey, but I didn't take them, so I could take them.
Okay, so that's a section through the, actually,
So north, south.
but that's not, okay.
That's-
oh, it's up
That's
top.
about the same. That point is
It's
the
up
same.
at the top.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there it is.
Yeah, right.
I think this is.
That's his house.
Where you can see his house on the knoll.
I don't believe that section is ours, my client's
Yeah,
house.
the last time we shed plans, we did not have a cross-section of ours.
We asked for that section, but that is not my client's house.
Is it,
Oh, then.
can you tell from the contours where those two houses sit?
They're both roughly.
It's about 170.
They're at about the same height.
And
Roughly the
this
same.
house is at
Yeah.
170.
So,
What's that?
and they're at about the same distance.
Yeah.
What are you saying is the same height?
The elevation at this house here is 170.
It's like those, the cross-section goes from
And the section over here, 170 wraps around. This is around 170.
They're sitting at about the same elevation.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're about the same distance from a new construction. So,
Yeah, except that just there'll be more preserved stuff down here for them than there will be for us. And this is all basically planning on being removed.
And that's the old plan.
And the thing is that because this sits considerably higher than this.
Can I just remind everybody for the record that
They already were given that.
the neighbor is currently in possession of a view of the picture that Kathy showed you because the predecessor in interest cut down all the trees on our property.
Yeah.
So that's got to be factored into the equation.
That preceded us, though.
I'm not saying you did it, I'm saying your predecessor in interest did. Whatever the fault was.
Somebody else cut down the trees to the stone
At a
wall.
considerable amount. There's a good distance of vegetation that was removed in that backyard, and you can see it here as an open field. So.
And that's the point that we wanted to emphasize. My name is Brian Levy. I represent the Shooters in the lawns for the 57 Colchester, right behind the project site, right here. And that's really the point that we wanted to emphasize is that, through no fault of my clients, those trees were cut. And basically, at the time they bought the house, they understood their backyard went up to the rock wall. This is not a property line dispute. The question really here is, and I thought that the planning board had given the applicant some direction last time, that is, don't move the wall. The wall has been there for a long time. It's part of the neighborhood, and it's basically antithetical to what the flex subdivision is all about, which is retaining woods, which is retaining stone walls and other features that are on the land, and being able to work with the regulations so that we can leave the land alone and maintain the character of the neighborhood. And basically what's happening here, and you can see that this lighter area is the area where more of the existing trees are staying. You don't see that lighter area over here.
No,
So
the lighter area is the meadow.
But in this area over here, there are very few existing trees remaining. And the 14 to 16 foot height trees that are going to be here are nothing like the photo that we provided you before. If you look at that screening, my clients have been looking at for many years, that'll be gone. I can't argue with Kathy. She knows trees better than I do. But when I look at that, it looks like a healthy screen of 40 to 60 foot tall trees between the two properties, which is going to be gone. And basically, the mover here is the wall. Once the wall moves, that sets everything else in motion. So the question here is whether the planning board is going to say, leave the wall alone or move the wall. Because once the wall moves, everything shifts. And so the character of the neighborhood between the two homes is completely changed.
Can I speak to the wall, because it was my idea? Whether it was good or bad, it was my idea originally. And the reason why I proposed it was sort of a practicality issue for the new, where did my plan go? So just imagine this for a second. Okay, so you live here, and there's a wall coming through your property right here, which is about almost 60 feet away from your property line here, right? And it's all grass on the other side. So you could keep the wall, and you're sort of giving up use of all that land, and it's empty.
But you could
So then
you can still plant behind the wall.
you could, but you'd be planting in it when you have imagine if you had a wall running through your lawn right now. So it feels like it's your property line, and then you've got this large piece of land that belongs to you but doesn't look like it belongs to you, but it's all grass. So what are you going to do? Plant that and put some grass here but still have a wall running through your grass? It seemed to make sense to me to move this to the property line, partly maybe to prevent anything more happening there that shouldn't have happened before, but also as that then becomes the edge of the property. You plant in front of the wall, and then you can have the lawn that a family might like to have. So that was really where it came from.
But is it that big a deal? You could plant behind the wall.
Yeah, but you're kind of giving up. If you were going to plant behind the wall, and you didn't want to put grass back there because it doesn't really make sense to put grass on the other side of the wall.
Put the screen planting back there.
Yes, but then think about it. If it's 60 feet of mulch, it's bigger than any of the buffer that we already were going to do considerably. This is a big piece of land. When you go back and you look at the stakes for the property line and how much it's kind of being visually given up,
It's 6,000 square feet.
it's 6,000 square feet of property that then you would be mulching, planting, irrigating, and maintaining just because this wall is in kind of a funny spot on your
But
land.
you're doing it anyway.
No,
What?
no, because right here is the existing
No,
lawn.
I know,
so we're
but you're
pushing
still
the
mulching,
lawn.
planting.
Yes, but a much smaller area. Now your lawn goes, considerably, and it makes sense. Otherwise, you've got a wall through the middle of your lawn.
The board has had some situations where, especially transition from, say, the clear area for the house towards forested, where we've said, no mulch. Put down that leaf meadow mix where
Leaf litter.
yeah.
Yeah.
432 Concord. There are examples that the board has approved that said, you know what, we want this to naturalize. And in some ways, it would make sense to have that meadow sort of start to come up a little bit and to provide some natural understory so that it isn't maintained in that area as sort of, not that mulch can be pristine, but a manicured area, and that could actually be a nice transition.
Yeah.
More of a natural
That's right. You could almost bring the meadow around
Yeah.
the corner. And they're not really giving up 6,000 square feet of lawn. They're giving up this, I don't know what that
No, I'm
square
saying
footage
that we would
is.
be-
It's a little, it's a sliver.
Right, but if we keep the wall here, we're all of a sudden we have 6,000 square feet. We have more than we would be in this scheme of area to landscape.
Well, he just said, what about a meadow mix or something and let that understory?
It's not
go
going
on?
to change. We're still going to plant right up to the property line. And the effect at the end is no different for the abutter because we're still going to plant right up to the property line. We're going to take out all that lawn.
I think most
and we're gonna
importantly, the
plant
wall
buffer.
is an amenity for the abutter today. And if you plant a screen in that buffer, they're not going to see it anymore unless you move it.
I guess I don't think it doesn't look like it's that big.
But if you were living there, the thing is that, if you were living there, there's a big difference between facing right at a wall and facing right at woods, which is what we all intentionally did. As far as the practicality, they gain no more yard per se, whether they put trees behind or they move the wall and then put trees in front of it. They really, as far as practical yard, they have a tremendous yard still. It doesn't change that fact. But from us looking at our window every day, which had a wall pushed up right against towards our house, that's something, anyone who was to put up a fence would always have to consider what the neighbors would see. And we bought the house with the woods in the background, and everyone else who lives there has the woods to the background.
But don't you currently look out your window and see the wall?
We look at
Because
the trees,
no, but I'm saying, you're seeing, the wall that we're talking about is about 18 inches high, a foot. And you currently look out your window, and what you see is trees, and in front of the trees you see the stone wall.
But it's much more offensive to have a wall right up smack against you. Whether you're
Well,
looking
I'm
for
just
a wall
saying it's
another
the- what I'm
20
saying
feet further
is-
back or not is different.
Well, I'm saying, I think what Kathy and everyone is saying is that where the wall is almost incidental, because it's a question of what you're going to see right up against you. And if it's not that, no, it's incidental in that you're not going to be looking out onto the lawn anymore, because the lawn is not on your property. And so the edge of the property will be in some way marked.
I just want to bring one photo to the board's attention, which is in the record already attached to the letter. This is the string which shows the new location where the property line is. Basically, the stone wall will be brought not quite up to the property line, but close enough, and you can see exactly what's going to happen, which is a terrific result for my
My
client.
name is Callie Vaughn. I live at 57 Colchester on the south side of the rock wall. And when we fell in love with the town and bought the house and fell in love with the house, we fell in love with the beautiful woods in the town and the beautiful woods on the backdrop on the Sears property and all the trees and the foliage is beautiful. And we fell in love with the potential for this large backyard for our children to play in. And we acknowledge the property line. But if the rock wall moves, then it would feel like our space is right up in front of us, and it would feel like it just got moved right to our face, and we've been enjoying the openness and the beautiful backdrop of the trees for so long, and it would change the character of the neighborhood.
So how about if we remove the wall altogether? We would prefer not to have to move it.
Prefer not to have to move it, but just plant on the other, plant on.
Remove it.
No,
I'm saying
just
not
remove
remove
it.
it. Just remove it.
It's
What's wrong with
really,
that?
yeah.
And you can see it there. It's
That size
hard that
is
wall.
the complaint.
What's wrong with that? If they just take the wall out?
Sure.
And you have to understand, I don't think
One of the things, I know exactly what you're saying, when you buy a house and you fall in love with it, and it has a wonderful undeveloped backdrop. I assume you all knew that that property was for sale.
We didn't, but that's okay.
Well, but
And that's why
it's
we're-
been for sale, obviously, for some time. Sometimes neighbors go on the little assumption that it will never get built on because it's kind of impossible to get in there. And then when this happens, I can understand having a broken heart because it will be a big change. And we're trying very hard to make this change not be too awful for you all. But there will be a change, and y'all don't own that property. You have the opportunity to buy it, I'm sure,
Right.
as a neighborhood. So,
Yep.
but you didn't. And so now it will be developed, and we're doing the best we can to make it so it's not too bad for you. This is not a bad idea. Maybe we just take the whole stone wall out, it allows them to plant in. And then there's nothing, but there will be a change there. It's not going to be the beautiful high canopy anymore.
Yeah, but the question is, the thing is that by removing the wall totally, we're still not undoing the result here, which will be the clear cutting of the tree screening which is there, which is 40 to 60 feet tall.
But they can plant right in. You know, they can do the
Right,
best
but we're
they
talking
can.
about planting at 14 to 16 feet, which is going to take a generation to recreate.
Kathy did say that she would go out and look. I mean, it looks to me like there's obviously something.
I'm happy to look
that
again.
can maybe stay.
Understood.
And you've got to appreciate the irony of somebody clear cutting on somebody else's property. And now, the person who owns the property wants to do exactly what the neighbor did. And there's an objection from people because of a misunderstanding about the property line.
Understood. It's an
And
expectation.
as Sue was saying, we're doing our best to
No, I
try
understand.
and cobble together a solution. Given the fact that this is a developable piece of property, we're trying our best to make it work for everybody. The landscape designer is willing to go out and work with you to preserve the maple trees that you mentioned to the greatest extent that she can. That would be a requirement. If you don't want the stone wall in your face, you won't get it in your face. Of course, it was wonderful to see nothing but woodland there when you bought the house. But believe me, most of us have gone through this experience. I used to look at a field across the house from me, or across the road from me. There's now a house there, and we're not. We can't freeze it. We have to mitigate it as much as we can, but we can't freeze it. Yes.
And ironically, one more thing is that there's almost no vegetation at the bottom, on the lower portions of any of these trees. They have very high canopies because they keep looking for some light. So in fact, the plants that we're bringing in will eventually give you better screening, and they'll be under better conditions with more light than anything that's there now.
On the other hand, as we do say this few, we all know that the
Absolutely.
canopies they're looking for scaling.
Absolutely.
That's what they're looking for. And once freed up with some light and air, especially if they're making they respond instantly. Within 2 years, you'll have
More than
bigger-
happy to do that.
Just before we leave it behind, and I wanted to say this for the record, we want to be clear on whether or not we have your authorization in the permit to remove it. I think an idea that might be worth talking about, or reserving at least, is to move it a few feet out of the middle of the grass and against the northern edge of the planted area. We wouldn't encroach into the planted area or beyond the planted area. So,
You mean to just act as a border, right?
yeah,
So move it from where it is to
it
just.
would be roughly. Well, I think we'd rather get rid of it. So
It's not a great looking wall. It gets better.
Thank
you.
for saying that. Putting a nice wall in there between your yard, your lawn and the trees
Keeps the kids out of the tent.
might be a nice feature.
Okay, you had a question.
34 Sears Road, so we are butters on the northwest corner of the property. And I had
Would be which one?
northwest corner.
This one on that big one right there.
I had questions pertaining to several issues, and the first one was with regard to drainage. Metro West engineers took a look, and they wanted to see an operations and maintenance plan that specifically dealt with drainage of the driveway and all of the new areas, which people did. It's Appendix A, and Joe has, I believe, received a copy of this. It was recommended by Metro West that this be recorded in the Registry of Deeds as a standalone document so that all future land owners, property owners of this property recognize the importance of the maintenance of their property based on the wet aspects of the land on which they sit. And that hadn't been brought up this evening, and I'd like to make certain that it's heard, reviewed, and if at all possible, accepted. So that was one of my concerns.
It seems like a reasonable idea. Sure.
Okay. So that was with regard to drainage. With regard to the elevations, the northwest corner, I believe, has been built up due to, I think, septic and also the seasonal conditions that you found. And if I'm not mistaken, the property elevation now on that end is higher than the existing elevation at the center of the proposed dwelling by 9 feet. Is that correct? At 171.5?
Well, the top of the system is 168.5.
The height is 168.5.
Okay.
And at the front door.
The first floor,
You're at
pertaining to,
167.
and you have to bear with me here, not being an architect. I'm concerned that with the buildup, that the northwest portion of the building is now significantly higher than the remainder. And if you do look at, you pull away your drawings and look at just your aerial.
This one?
Yeah, it does appear as though the garage end is much higher than like the central ridge line, and I'm wondering.
These two are the same. This section and this section are the same ridge line and they're 35.4 feet, which is less than 37 foot.
I think what you get is the garage floor and the driveway has come up because of the seasonal high ground. We had, how many steps before? We like 5 or 6 steps?
They're like 6 steps up. So what's happened is that this point hasn't, like that's kind of been a fixed point, and what has happened because of the water table is that the driveway and the grade at that point was raised up, which just meant that there's fewer steps from the driveway, from the garage into the house. But the ridge and the mass of the house have stayed.
But she's concerned about that.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to.
No, I understand.
Changing.
I understand what you're saying.
So the house will not, it will be on par in elevation with all of its neighbors. It will not be above the abutters' ridge lines.
I don't know what your ridge lines are. I mean, we don't have all of the ridge lines.
No, I understand that. I'm just.
How about the
Site
site sections
sections
down
again.
there that you've got kind of?
Back up on the other side.
I have noticed that the first floor is nearly 8 feet higher than the existing ground surface.
Correct, because the ground surface is 2 feet above the water level, so the basement is approximately at that level. But that level is lower than, for instance, your house. The grade in your house is higher up.
So I guess that makes sense. I'm just concerned because when I hear that something's going to be the first floor is 8 feet above.
It's 8 feet above what's existing, but the grade around it is being, the grade around the house is being built up for the septic system, et cetera. And
Okay,
so
so
that's still going to be that is still going to be at or below
Your house is higher.
Your house is
You know
higher.
that, right?
Yes, I do
Yeah.
know that. I realize, but I'm concerned that if at grade, then you build 2 feet up, then you go 9 feet above that. It just is starting to add up, and so I'm concerned that.
She's worried about the mass. One question I have
And
is,
Go ahead.
going back to the perspective again, I understand what you're trying to do. You're framing the central section by the
Correct.
2 gables. I
Yes.
understand that. But there might be a different way to look at it, which is that there's a major gable on this side, and you make the gable on that side subsidiary and lower the ridge a couple of feet.
We did look at that, and it, and from, number one, just from a design perspective, it to me looked quite lopsided, but it also gave us a lot of problems inside the house in terms of lost space, because we're already, in terms of this mass, and part of it was shrinking, we were shrinking the footprint of the building, and we're shrinking the width of this piece, and by dropping that down, we're already encroaching in all the bedrooms on the second floor there, just because of three-dimensional.
Looks like the plates over the window head, so it looks like you get ceiling height at least at the top of the window. So you've got quite a bit of space over the window heads. It's just adequate. Am I misreading that?
I think the render put these are actually like little laundry room windows, and he copied the big windows in there. But if we look at the side of look at the other side of it, in order to get the windows in as it is, if you look at garage elevation, we're just at this point, and these are being held down. But this window, which is the bathroom window, is underneath the ridge, and so if you tried to drop this another 2 feet, we're going to start impacting all those rooms considerably in terms of head height. But it's also a question of, and it's also a question of having looked at the lowering that piece, and what ends up happening is that it no longer reads as 2 pieces, but it starts reading as 1 piece with then, something else that continues on.
But it's not really a symmetrical design anyway. So
no, but it is. As I said, we looked at that, and it had a very negative impact on it.
One possibility is you could almost do a cross gambrel gable and make that work. And then the ridge drops, but you have a less of a pitch in the central section. It might mean that you have more dormer windows, but you've got dormer windows in the connecting piece anyway. I'm just saying it would be a way to reduce the impact of that mass on that side of the building.
South side here?
This is the south. This is north.
Right up there, the far side is.
This is facing
Whatever,
north.
that little piece right there with the pretty, that one section to the left of this, I don't know which direction, but is really lovely and reads beautifully to me. And then sunlight connects into this kind of barn-like, clunky thing. So I'm not the architect, nor am I the taste police, but that section to the left is pretty, it flows, it's actually really very attractive. And then you get into sort of like land. Is there anything you all can do to maybe not just, and maybe, you know you can't bring it down 2 feet.
We looked at a bunch of different, after the last meeting, we talked and just said, okay, I want to just go over what we heard, and we tried to incorporate all your comments. And we actually really liked this design. We put a lot of work, we looked at all different sort of alternatives with that side to just complete the design.
And again, reminder,
I like
we're
the
1
third bay down.
8 inches under your height.
Yeah, we pulled it down, and this, from the front of the house, you can see the substantial door over there by this side. If you look down, just point it up, and the border, the landscape border, the amount of trees and existing trees there.
Have you saved a bunch over there?
Next one.
Anything that's sort of
That's
a
sort of
lighter
olive
color,
red color.
that's sort of more transparent. All of these are saved. And then all the darker ones are here.
All right, well, let me throw something out that just will drive you around the bend. What about making it a hip gable, so that end of the house is a hip roof as opposed to a gable?
All due respect, Chairman.
I
I
don't like
apologize.
when people say that.
No, and I apologize.
That idea.
I just received an architecture bill today, and I actually love this. And that bill was substantial. We really like what we come up with, and with the landscape plan surrounding it, and the actual height, we feel confident that it's a good design.
Well, I'm glad you like it. I'm trying to mitigate the impact on the neighbors. That's my job. And that might be a possibility. And I don't know if you have cardiac arrest with a hip roof or.
Well, and it's again, it's what we're trying, from a design perspective, what we're trying to do is to have sort of the Papa Bear and the Mama Bear sort of bookending this thing with the connector between them. And once we start, once we start changing what the roof of that other piece is, we're changing, the sort of the essence of what the design is. And, it will be detailed properly and beautifully. And I think that the question is like, is this thing sticking out? Out of the ground, and as I said, it's already, we're 1'8" below the high. It isn't, the first floor isn't 8 feet off the finished grade. It's off what's existing, which is where the water table is. We could push it down further without getting hit by the flood. We've done everything we can to lower it, and we're, there isn't a third floor. It's not like we're building. The whole point of this architecture was to build it as low as we felt really comfortable with, and to, not to have this big third floor attic. There's no third floor here. There's probably just enough room for, an air conditioning unit up there.
All right, well, we're going in circles. Actually, she's had a question now for about 15 minutes.
Still have some additional
All right.
Okay, I'm Roberta Siegel, 50 Laurel Road, and my property borders the entire west end of this property up at the top there. Right there, right, yes. My concern is that the back area of my property, which, as I said, borders the entire west end of 22 Sears, is already somewhat wet. And I am very concerned about any water at all being added to my property due to whatever reason, whether it be land movement, septic system, I guess I'm talking about a septic area being built out, fill, drainage routes, or anything that makes runoff. And I'd like to see their engineer prove to us, not only me, but all the neighbors, that there will be no further issues of water being added to my property or to anyone else's who border on 22 Sears.
Well, that's why we have a consulting civil engineer for the
Right.
planning board. We heard you correctly, Dave, saying that you think that this is going to actually result in a reduction in water runoff?
Yeah. So you just don't have me this time yet. I mean, Rob too reviewed it, so kind of poking Peter for like the last month or so. We're both. Again, I don't want to speak for Rob. I guess I can speak for Rob because he emailed this, but I'm satisfied.
I mean, that's all. That's the best we can do is go to our expert and say, is this going to have an impact or not? And if the answer, and a butter also hired another civil engineer who came to the same conclusion that there's not going to be water runoff. Does that mean that it's it's absolutely positively carved in granite? It's I don't know. It's the best that we're able to do.
I guess the best, it will not make the situation worse, but that doesn't mean that if it's a bad situation, it won't continue to be a bad situation. It will be a slightly improved bad situation.
David? I know that you take care of all the runoff of the roofs and hard surfaces and everything like that, but when I look at this, I can see that the contouring is such that it will be sort of a slope going down to hurry up. Do you actually include that in your calculations? Is the fact that there might be, grass sometimes acts as an impervious surface too, and will run down.
Well, that was a big wrestling match over the last couple of weeks.
Was?
Yeah,
Okay,
was
so
kind
now-
of how to model it.
Yeah.
The existing conditions, the proposed conditions, and actually, you ended up modeling it like 4 different ways. We kind of kept just throwing stuff out there, and he would just change the model. But yeah, I mean,
So you did take in.
it takes into account, that you get more runoff of grass versus undeveloped woods versus impervious. And, that's the stuff engineers will argue about when we look out.
So what happens to that house behind? I mean,
The septic
is there a
sits
chance that
right
there'll
there.
be a little bit more squishy back there?
No,
Is there a big risk?
there'll be more. The water's going to be collected, and that corner is the high point too.
Yeah.
The slope is to the south.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So it's all coming in this
Yeah.
direction. Oh, towards
Yeah,
the
right.
house.
Towards the
the
house.
new home, away from it.
So the big thing is not to block their flows. From the folks on the north.
Okay, right. So the, all
But,
right.
yeah, so the infiltration and all that stuff is not the germane part of what would be their concern. It would be not to create a dam across the property
Right,
line.
Okay. Do you get that? I just got it.
It's going to go the other way.
I'm on the west, I've got on the north.
Well, you're
over here.
there.
Right.
And
And the water's
and
going
the
to
contour lines.
looping this way and this way.
They
Down,
flows
the
down.
water will be going down.
So nothing's going to be going.
Nothing will be going up the page. Everything will be going down the page.
Yeah.
Everything will be going
Just going down the page.
It goes to the south, which again points to all
And
the
the issue
issues that are on the
is
south
they
side.
should not create a dam there.
Well, south that way.
Roberta's going to go off your tennis
Too bad.
court.
Okay, so this is Weston.
What we're saying is, when we brought up the issue of the flooding in that area, it's coming towards this way.
We're saying it's the existing water currently is coming the same way that it is currently, and there will be less of it because of all the remediation that's being done by putting the house in place. There'll be nothing. There's nothing added. There's certainly no flow added. In fact, there's some flow that's reduced.
So you're saying even in the direction where the water is flowing, it will be reduced over what it was before?
Right.
Because the storage.
Hence the concern of the other civil engineer bringing up the issues of what that was based on.
And he was just saying that they modeled it on all three, and in all three conditions it was less.
Right.
Two
different
issues.
Right. Then we're opening up another door.
So you said you had one more comment.
Yes, and this was back to the landscape. And I'm concerned with how this all will be phased in, what will be taken out, to make room for the house, what will be planted in what particular order, and then so forth. We need to,
Yeah.
what
Well,
do
that's a
we-
good question. I mean,
I'd like to make a suggestion, because I've been thinking a lot about this, because I have a house going up next to me.
yeah.
And the developer has agreed to do a lot of screening, but we asked him to wait until it's framed. So that we could really see, because it would be such a drag with the big trees and then think, oh, we wish we'd moved them over. So I would think about requesting, and also I'm hoping that if it were framed, we might have water, which is kind of essential, keeping all of this stuff alive. So if I was thinking about talking to you about this, I would want to get up in my windows while we're out there, and we're happy to do that, and move stuff around until we've moved it into the best spots for you once the house is framed.
And that was another thing I wanted to see. I just hired some landscape architects, and I'd like them on my property with me as things are being positioned and so forth.
So it's a really valuable thing to do.
The only question would be one of schedule. I don't know when assuming that this goes ahead.
You mean if it was going to sit, it would probably be, I don't know when it's.
When the framing would actually be,
Right.
would that coincide with when planning would be ideal?
But I wonder if we could clear enough to build the house, but leave the perimeters and do a second round of clearing I don't know if that's feasible, it may not be, but.
Not in that corner with the septic system.
Yeah, right, we can't do that right there.
But, I mean, I think that thinking of it being framed by the fall planting season may be optimistic, certainly by spring.
Which is when you want to select the trees anyway. We get much better selection of trees in the spring.
By spring it will, I mean, assuming this body, approves it, that, by this spring it will be framed, and that's the best time to be planting anyway.
And absolutely, I mean, already it's July 1 and the plant supply is incredibly low. So even though they do another dig in the fall, they'll have a much better shot at tagging trees next spring.
Well, it sounds like a reasonable thing to condition then, have the planning coincide with the framing sometime in the early part of the spring.
Facilitate that's optimal placement.
Yes, sir.
One more question. I hear that just a very easy question for the drainage. When you build the driveway, my house is right adjacent, right on the corner, Sears, right there. So when you cut the driveway in, I hear that all the rain is coming back this way. So what am I suffer from your driveway coming into me? And your driveway, the height of my land or high?
It's pretty much at the same elevation. We just sort of followed the numbers.
So what's
going to happen is the water that today, what happens is the water hits that and it runs towards your house. We're going to put a new driveway in, so that's pavement surface. The water's going to run out quicker towards your property.
Towards my property, right?
What we put in is a swale, grass swale.
And we know, I don't agree that the swale is going to catch the width of the driveway towards my property. A swale is not going to take a width of 10 feet of driveway.
Well, it's not just this grass. It's not just the grass swale that's holding it. What we've done is we've put a crushed stone with perforated pipe storage underneath.
And we okay with that? I mean, you the consultant, so I'm only asking.
Right, and then the other consultants, one of his concerns was that, and they've developed it, is that it's maintained and it stays there, working well in the future.
Well, I mean, I'm only questioning because being in construction, I know when you build a new site, the water doesn't drain as good as we tell we will.
Yeah, the simple solution for the driveway was picking up in the swale and then putting in crushed stone and a pipe underneath it. In the future, this will get built, it will get sold to someone, and it will get sold to someone else. If you're still there and suddenly the swale disappears, well, that swale is supposed to be there forever. So that's,
thank you.
That's what you're talking about.
Great. Okay. Do you guys have anything to contribute to the conversation?
Could you speak to what maintenance would be for cleaning out this retention around the driveway? In other words, what would be required generally? Is it once a year? Once
for
every
that.
2 years?
Well, for the stuff that picks up the impervious areas, it's more of an inspection, and then you clean it out. Because the stuff from the roof will never collect gone. The swale is the big one. That needs to be maintained really by like a landscaper.
It's mostly keeping leaves and sticks and stones out. Also on the driveway itself, not using sand and gritty materials to keep the driveway from slippage during the winter. So including those, that's what the maintenance.
And the big part's the inspection. Is that someone goes out, looks at it on a regular basis, with an eye towards what it's supposed to be used for, how it's supposed to be working. And then the only other thing is, Mr. Gemmer suggested that the O&M plan get recorded as a standalone document. And I know there's a lot of engineers and lawyers in the room. I would wonder, because these things kind of boomerang. I'm all for that the O&M plan gets recorded, but maybe attached to the decision.
I agree. I don't think the registry will take it if it's not.
Only because,
so Exhibit A to the inspection permit.
And even if they did, we've seen for so many years, just if it's not attached the bigger the package that gets filed, the more likely it will come back to the future owner, the next owner, whoever gets it down the road. If it's some other stray document living in the registry, no one will ever see it.
Yeah. So it gets registered either way, but it just...
It gets attached to the...
If it's attached, it's more likely to be seen. That's the point that you're...
Right, to the decision.
Yeah.
And then at least when they tell it the future owners tell us they don't know about the decision,
Yeah.
when we hand it to them, they'll
We've heard that
be attached.
often, due diligence. All right, Steve, anything?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay.
The one final on the lighting, I didn't review it. It sounds as though you are all comfortable with their calculations.
It's actually under our old standard, and under our new standard. So it's not as intensive as even our threshold. So it shouldn't create a large impact on the neighbors. I mean, all of the fixtures that we require are dark sky compliant fixtures, which mean they don't shine light out, they shine light down. So it should be pretty low key.
No spotlights, correct?
No spotlights.
No spotlights aiming off.
No spotlights, no lights and trees.
No uplights, no downlights and trees.
Could we request like a contingency that, like, if in fact, it's going to get approved, that the abutters can sort of discuss with the landscape people or work with landscape people to design a border that's fair? Because if we lose 40 to 60 feet and we're only going to be replaced with 18 to 20, that we could at least have a say in what it looks like, because we're going to be the ones looking at it all the time from our side too.
Well, there's a landscape plan. We're signing off on a landscape plan. What we can do is work with you on the placement of the trees on the border, so that just as you suggested for the other neighbor, so that the location of those plants offer the greatest screening.
Sure, and also, but perhaps even the choice of things, and I can talk with Kathy as well about that, because we both know, so just because some of the things, it's going to be both of our walls, stuff like that, and so, to sort of at least work together.
She's already got her varieties listed though in the landscape plan.
Right, that's what's going to get in the decision. So the only way that could change is if they came back to us with a modified plant list. So, I mean, that's not impossible, but I don't know if you've had a chance to look at what she's proposing to do.
I have. I just would rather not have a wall of evergreen right to our thing. And there's a couple deciduous, but there really is predominantly that, and I'd love to sort of alter that, because that's what
Kathy,
we
can you speak again?
Yeah, where's my plan?
Stand there, Kayla. We don't want to.
It's really hard for me to figure out who wants evergreens and who wants not.
I think everybody would prefer that.
Right. So there is a mix. And I can run through this a little bit, but just for you guys.
Basically, because for here, you basically have evergreen, deciduous, evergreen. So that's what
So
borders
here's
us.
right, but there are also other deciduous trees in here. So my
We will
proposal.
see that through the evergreen.
No, but here's what we just suggested to Patty, and I'm happy to do it with everyone.
Yep.
When it's time to plant this piece, you're home, we're there, we got big machines, and we will move these around in whatever way makes you happy.
That means the ones that you have forward, you will then put back?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. To tell you the truth, and
Follow up on that to make an appointment.
we always adjust plans when we get on the site. You draw the circles, but you got a huge spruce, so you move this one a little here. It's a very fluid process.
Right.
So I'm happy to keep the fluidity until you're happy. And you'll have, looks to me like pushing 30 trees. I'm not counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 25 trees to do with whatever you would like in that along the property.
Consistent with the landscape.
And
Right.
you also offered that you could go around with us to tag some of the existing trees that currently are in that place that we go.
Well, we'll have our landscape
Because there's a lot of
consultant
like.
But we'll do that.
I mean, one of the things I'd be recommending is within the decision that the site walk prior to any removal of trees occur to review the trees to be protected and also just to look at any other tree that maybe is the opportunity for being protected. And that Kim, Kathy, and along this property, residents at 57 Colchester could be invited to at least walk that side of it as well.
I just want to ask Kim.
Sure.
Kim, do you think that this is the best plan you could imagine if you were designing the landscape? Is there anything that you would do?
Olmsted was to come down and...
No, but is there anything, if you're looking at this, that you would do differently?
I'm watching.
You think could be that you could improve upon?
You won't insult Kathy.
I mean, that's just a super loaded question.
Okay.
What I asked Kathy to do was to give a good proportion of evergreens so that we have coverage during the winter, but to vary the species of evergreens, so it's not just one kind of evergreen, and then to add in some deciduous so that we have that, you know, variety of texture and canopy. But we also looked at the understory. I mean, we're looking at this from a health of the ecosystem to screening in spring, summer, fall, winter, and varying up so we don't have a monoculture thing. Like I'm looking at it more from that perspective, but giving us a solid buffer. And I think, I mean, we've beat this thing over, and I mean, we've gone back and forth on this several times. I'm confident that it's going to do what we want it to do.
All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Just on behalf of the applicant, we'd like to thank the board. Again, I think a lot of your ideas are reflected in the plan. We think it's a better plan because of that. I'd like to close the public hearing.
One last question. Stone wall, stay, go. What did you finally decide? Is that
We
how?
wanted to grow. That's the
Is
simplest.
that okay with you? It's okay with the neighbors, so that's
So
fine.
stone wall is gone. I mean, you just want that to be included in the decision?
But just where it starts to wander away
Where-
from what's...
Right, over here.
That
here
can
on-
stay.
It's going to stay.
Right.
The part that we were proposing to move, we'll just
Don't
move.
move, just
And we
remove.
won't,
Right. Or that you'll relocate that.
we won't relocate it at all. We'll move it off the property.
All right. Good. In that case, does someone want to make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second, anyone?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, take care. This was number 2. Take care. I know how you feel, but, you know, No, but I was talking about that house across the street. When it first got built, I thought that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen that late. No planning board. Vegetation is all yeah, so you're just gone.
That's really important. Thank you for getting
I'll be in touch with that finalizing. Last schedule last week was
Did you see how much these pines and stuff has grown this season? Some of these trees have been
It'd be fun, I think, just leave it on the table and maybe fix the
Ready to go? Gotta keep rolling. We'll never finish. It's 9 o'clock. That's pretty cool. That's good. David has never
You know what I mean? Before to start.
No, let's go ahead and start.